On this edition of Primetime Politics, affordability. Our MPs weigh in on what's being done and what could be done as Canadians feel the pinch of inflation. In the Conservative leadership campaign, we hear from Patrick Brown on accusations of wrongdoing by his campaign and on the bad blood between him and Pierre Poilievre. And our journalist panel is in to talk about the cost of living and Conservative politics. But we start with the government's efforts to help Canadians deal with the ever-increasing cost of living. Joining me now are three MPs from the different parties. Francesco Sorbara is the Liberal MP for the Toronto area riding of Vaughan Woodbridge. Dan Albas is the Conservative MP for the BC riding of Central Okanagan, Similkeen Nicola, and his party's finance critic. And Daniel Blaikie is the NDP member for the Winnipeg riding of Elmwood Transcona and his party's finance critic. All three of you, welcome. We're going to start with Francesco Sorbara. Let's start with the government. You've heard the way the minister's speech has been playing out over the last 24 hours. She talked up the billions of dollars in relief she says is coming Canadians' way. What do you say, though, to people who say, show me something concrete, show me something new, show me something immediate?
Thank you, Martin, for the question, and good afternoon to my honorable colleagues. What I would say is, look, at this moment in time, we know that Canadian families and Canadians from coast to coast to coast are being pressured by inflation. And we know what has caused the inflation, which are most part to do with global factors. But we also know that we've put in place a suite of measures. We ran on a number of these measures in the last election campaign on affordability that are going to be helping Canadians right in the near term. This is going to be money landing in the pockets of Canadians literally in the coming weeks. For example, Martin, for seniors, we know people on fixed income are very much impacted by inflationary pressures. For seniors, over 3 million seniors will be getting a 10% increase in old age security in the month of July. That'll be landing. For people that are vulnerable on the housing front, a $500 payment will be issued to literally millions of individual Canadians in the month of July as well. That will be helping them. The Canada's Workers Benefit, again, $1.7 billion, up to $2,400 for a family of three here in Ontario, for example, that will be receiving. Again, literally 3 million Canadians that will be assisted on that front. On childcare, by the end of the year, a 50% reduction in fees in almost all provinces. So very tangible amounts of money and dollars will be helping really the most vulnerable that have been impacted by and are being impacted by inflation today.
Okay, Dan Albas, your party has been critical of what you heard in the speech. We just heard Mr. Sorbara rhyming off a number of measures that will come into effect in the coming month or two. What is your response to the government's suite of measures, as he calls it?
So not every Canadian is over 75 or has kids requiring childcare. There are many Canadians with decent jobs who find themselves increasingly unable to make ends meet because they can't afford $100 or more to fill their gas tanks. So yesterday's announcement by the government, the finance minister, has failed them. And it's because she continues to stick by the government's line where this is a global problem. It's not our problem. They need to get rid of the lectern. They need to stop lecturing to Canadians. They need to actually start doing some concrete measures, like we've been calling for a GST cut on gasoline, get rid of the GST on home heating or electricity, and also stop fueling inflation. So put a cap on discretionary spending. And also stop inflating user fees. Morneau, when he was the finance minister, put in place in 2017 an escalator that basically means anything from national parks to ports, automatically user fees go up lockstep with inflation. These are the things that she could be doing. But you know what, Martin? They don't listen to anyone. They're not even listening to Canadians. So simply recycling what they've done in the last two budgets isn't new, and it won't help.
Okay, Daniel Blaikie, you are supporting the government in terms of your supply and confidence agreement with the government. You're going to be supporting them for the next few years. What do you make, though, of the latest measures or lack thereof concerning inflation?
Well, the supply and confidence agreement does two things. One is it means that on certain confidence votes or important votes that would cause an election otherwise, we've agreed not to topple the government. That doesn't mean that we're supporting the government in everything that they do. Right. And I think this question of inflation is an important example where we're proposing things that would help people now. Just because many factors driving inflation are beyond the government's control doesn't mean that there isn't anything that they can do to help in the meantime. And we've certainly heard from a lot of Canadians, you don't have to go far at all to know that people are really struggling right now. So that's why we've talked about, for instance, increasing the GST rebate. We've talked about adding to the Canada Child Benefit for this year in the face of inflation. But the other thing that we've talked about, and I think it's important for Canadians who may not be the object of this to know that this is happening, the government is currently garnishing people's employment insurance payments and all sorts of other payments that are going out to families who have some CERB debt with the government. These are families that are pinched for cash right now. Many of them are already living in poverty. It's not a source of government revenue. They don't have the money to give, and yet the government refuses to give them a pass on making those payments, or to simply declare a low-income CERB payment amnesty, as many groups like Campaign 2000 have been calling for some time now. Those are things that government can do that would go a long way to relieve some of the financial pressure on many Canadian households, and also relieve the anxiety that comes with that real pressure. So as I say, just because the government doesn't control all the factors driving inflation doesn't mean there aren't things that it can do to help. It has a responsibility to do that. And the Deputy Prime Minister did not show that she understands that in her speech to the Empire Club on Bay Street yesterday. And I think part of the problem is that's really not the audience when you're talking about inflation. The audience has to be ordinary Canadians that are really struggling to make ends meet now, and it isn't the Empire Club on Bay Street that's having that experience.
Okay, Francesco Sorbara, let's explore that. Some people are suggesting that the minister's speech to the Empire Club, albeit, but the minister's speech could actually have backfired politically because it's drawing more attention to the fact that there are not going to be any new measures announced this summer. For example, we heard Daniel Blaikie just referring to the possibility of a one-time top-up, a payment to people receiving certain benefits like you did in 2020 with the GST. You doubled the GST credit, tax credit. There won't be new measures. You talked about a raft of measures that are all announced. Is it difficult to talk to people who wanted something new?
Martin, I want to say right off the bat that the money that will be arriving to Canadians, to assisting Canadians, is new money. The Canada Workers Benefit, that is new money that will be helping out literally 3 million Canadians and millions of families across Canada. The increase to seniors, the old age security, that is new money. The $500 payment for housing vulnerable Canadians, new money. In the indexation of all the benefits, the guaranteed income supplement, the Canada Child Benefit, which literally delivers billions, almost $30 billion a year to Canadians, again, indexed. That will be new money coming to and being received by Canadians from coast to coast to coast. These are policies that we put in place that are delivering real benefits, and lower payments for childcare in many provinces, which have already begun. Province of Ontario by the end of the year, a dental care plan that will help Canadians for kids, their families earning less than $90,000 this year. These are real and tangible new funds that will be arriving and assisting Canadians literally in the coming weeks. So, these measures were put in place and announced, yes, in prior budgets, absolutely, but we are delivering on these promises to make life more affordable for Canadians. Okay,
Dan Albas, one of the measures that your party's been proposing for a long time is a freeze on the carbon tax, not increasing it. Critics would argue that would delay action on climate change. You're also suggesting suspending the GST on gas and fuels, and a lot of the critics have said about that it would just hit the Treasury. It would increase the deficit, which you say is very important to get down. How do you respond to those two criticisms for your two major asks of the government?
First of all, we've been asking this government to bring into line its spending for quite a long time. The government says it actually can find $7 billion in savings in this year's budget. So there are some things the government knows they could start to tap down inflation, because Stephen Gordon from Laval University has already said that now is not the time for more inflationary deficit spending. It's not the right environment for it. But when it comes to windfall profits, the only windfall profits are coming right now is to the federal government, because it is receiving more money because as prices go up, taxes go up. And what we're suggesting is on a temporary basis to take the GST off, not just diesel and gasoline at the pumps, Martin, but also on household heating and household electricity. So what that is a key part, because energy is one of the drivers of inflation. So especially when we talk about helping low income or those on fixed income, they spend more proportion of their income on things like heating, like transportation, and on groceries. This is a way that we can tangibly help them out. It's the same thing we do right now for groceries. This is an affordable thing to do for a temporary basis.
Okay, Daniel Blaikie, last word to you. We mentioned the supply and confidence agreement. Obviously, do you think you'll see any movement on this, which you've been asking about for a long time, and that is the clawback, the EI clawback on the CERB payments? Do you think you'll see any movement on that anytime soon? And with the coming months, do you think it's going to get harder and harder to support the government in a supply and confidence motion as you see measures that you don't see come to fruition?
Well, I mean, what's critical for us is the delivery of the dental care piece. And, you heard it in Francesco's own talking points. They'd like to talk about childcare too. That was something that we pushed for a long time and ran on many times before the Liberals finally decided that not only was it possible, but it was something that they were going to do. We're here to continue to push on those issues, regardless of what the government of the day is doing, and to try and get them to do more of those things that we believe are going to help Canadians and that we ran on at election time. I think what's different about the inflation problem is that it's urgent and it's acute. It was something that wasn't on the radar last fall, for instance. And so it's something that really demands a new and urgent response. The kind of long-term things like dental and childcare are things that we already needed prior to this period of inflation. And the government shouldn't be doing it as an inflation response. There's something that's needed above and beyond that. And so when we see the government, for instance, chasing people for CERB repayments in a context where they already don't have enough money to pay their monthly bills, a compassionate thing that government can do that's pretty cost neutral because the money's not coming in the door anyway, would be to put a hold on requiring those repayments. And for people already living in poverty as their normal daily life, should be relieved of that debt burden altogether so that they can start picking up the pieces of their lives and try to find their own way to financial sustainability. So that's the kind of urgency that we need to see. And the agreement allows us to put pressure on the government and express our disagreement on those things, as well as many other issues.
Okay, we will watch that with great interest. I want to thank all three of you. And maybe the last time we have a chance to chat before the summer recess and you head back to your ridings. Daniel Blaikie, Dan Albas, and Francesco Sorbara, thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We turn now to the Conservative leadership race, which continues to generate accusations between the different leadership camps. Frontrunner Pierre Poilievre is being accused by several candidates of inflating membership sales, in part by sending misleading emails to supporters of other candidates, causing them to buy a second membership on Poilievre's online portal. The Poilievre camp denies any wrongdoing. It's accusing the Patrick Brown campaign of offering to reimburse supporters who buy memberships. CPAC's Peter Van Dusen spoke with Patrick Brown about the campaign so far.
Patrick Brown, first of all, thanks for taking time to speak with me tonight. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Look, here we are in this, what we call the persuasion phase, and I wonder what that means for you with the inability to get at some of the preliminary membership lists and so on. So what are you doing right now to try and drill down on support, build support as the leadership contest continues?
Well, we're in a great position in the sense that we signed up a massive amount of new members, and so we're getting organized with the memberships that we signed up. We've got the existing membership list that we're now approaching, and so that takes a lot of time. Obviously, we're eager to see the complete list, and it's unfortunate that one of the leadership campaigns is refusing to have that list released, but there's certainly no shortage of work to do. Today, I was speaking to Conservative Party members in Hamilton and London, and I'm getting out across the country to meet as many fellow Conservatives as possible to talk about my plan to build a modern, inclusive, multicultural, multi-faith Conservative Party that can win in every corner of the country.
All right, you alluded to the leadership campaign of Mr. Poilievre. I want to ask you, look, this is starting to feel like all-out war between you and Pierre Poilievre, and it just seems to be getting nastier and nastier on social media. Here's what Pierre Poilievre has been tweeting out today. Patrick Brown is drowning in scandal. He had to lie to cover up his poor membership sales. He has lost 3 of his 4 caucus supporters, including his national campaign chair. He's in free fall. How do you respond to that?
Well, it certainly doesn't sound like a confident frontrunner. He's telling everyone that he's confident he's going to win this. That scorched earth approach, really speaks to a desperate campaign. If they were confident, they wouldn't be, really so worried about my campaign. And the reality is, we're confident in our membership sales, and I think that's why he is concerned. And frankly, I think this is a distraction from the scandal that happened this week. He recommended to Canadians that they invest in Bitcoin as a means to avoid inflation, and Bitcoin has been in free fall. His cryptocurrency policies have been a disaster, and so Pierre Poilievre is an expert. He's very clever at communications and trying to distract the public. He doesn't want to be talking about the Bitcoin crisis this week because it's embarrassing.
Okay.
The economy used to be the strongest card for the Conservatives, and he is ruining our economic credentials based on the preposterous positions that he took recommending Bitcoin to Canadians.
He did underscore here the departure of MP Michelle Rempel-Garner as your campaign co-chair. She's gone to consider a run for the leadership of the United Conservative Party in Alberta. 2 other caucus supporters have already left your campaign to join Mr. Poilievre. So what do those departures say about the health of your campaign?
Well, first of all, I'd say Michelle Rempel is running for the leadership of the Alberta Conservative Party. I wish her well. She remains a supporter of my campaign and a friend. And of course, if someone has an opportunity to serve at a higher level, you're going to wish them well. And obviously, the resignation of Premier Jason Kenney created an opportunity. And I think the fact that one of my supporters is being approach to run for that position speaks to the caliber of supporters we have on my campaign. And I continue to be upbeat and encouraged. I think we've got a great path to victory in this leadership campaign. We just need to make sure that everyone we signed up, we get out to vote.
Okay. There's also a story, Brampton City Councillors, some of them, saying you've been using city staff on your leadership campaign. What do you say to that?
Well, that wasn't Brampton City Councillors. It was a Rebel Media report. And obviously, I have been very critical of Rebel Media. I don't consider them media. I think they are activists that push an extreme right-wing agenda. And we haven't used any city resources during this campaign. I've actually set a higher standard that I hope the Poilievre campaign will follow. I've been donating my own salary to charity during this leadership campaign to our hospital foundation, to Humanity First, and to Kelsa Aid, while Pierre Poilievre continues to take his federal paycheck in, despite the fact that he's not attending to his work in Parliament and he's busy on a leadership campaign. And so I made this challenge 3 months ago that the leadership campaigns should not be collecting a taxpayer salary during this leadership campaign. And I hope that he will consider my challenge and follow my example of not using any taxpayer resources during this leadership.
The party is, though, investigating, again, allegations from the Poilievre campaign that your campaign offered to reimburse people who bought memberships to support you. The party's now investigating that. What are they going to find?
Well, we certainly didn't support any practice like that, nor would we ever. And so I think these are distraction tactics. There was a huge story this week about the crisis in Bitcoin, and I think it's very peculiar that there's these distraction techniques of the Poilievre campaign. And frankly, I think it speaks to the fact they're nervous about their ability to get out to vote some of the members they signed up.
Do you know if anybody working on your campaign was offering to reimburse the purchase price of memberships taken out by people who support you?
Absolutely not. That's not a practice we would ever condone or support. Okay.
Let me ask you this, because I've been wondering since the campaign sort of got to where it's at and some of the nastiness. You and Pierre Poilievre sat in the same Conservative caucus for a decade here in Ottawa. Why is there so much bad blood between you?
Well, I just disagree with his politics. He's taken positions that I fundamentally don't agree with. And for me, a modern Conservative Party is inclusive. And I feel that he is catering to some of the darker elements on the internet in an attempt to get support. He's taken positions that I believe are on the wrong side of history. A great example would be Islamophobia, where he refused, even after the Quebec City terrorist attack, to condemn Islamophobia. His vote in the House of Commons against condemning hate against Muslim Canadians was wrong. His press conference on trying to ban the niqab, I thought, was trying to prey upon the insecurity of Canadians against each other. I think it's the responsibility of public servants to bring Canadians together, to fight hate, to push back against intolerance. And, unfortunately, that's not been the nature of his campaign. And certainly you see that in the vernacular that we hear from people like Pat King. And I don't want to see the type of polarization we've seen elsewhere in Canada. I want to build a Conservative Party that very clearly fights for everyone, regardless of who you love, where you're born, the color of your skin, what God you worship. I think the Conservative Party can be that force to bring Canadians together.
Right. You've already said you wouldn't run for office for a Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre, and I guess so you've clearly sort of got a line in the sand about what you're prepared to accept from whatever comes from the leadership race if you're not the leader. What's the key question then that you think members need to ask themselves before they mark that ranked ballot later this summer?
Well, I think the key question is electability. And to win the next election, we're going to need to win where the party has lost. We won the popular vote, but we lost in suburban Canada, in places like Vancouver and the Greater Toronto area. And the question is going to be is who can steal Liberal or NDP votes? And there was a poll that came out just this week that showed that Jean Charest and myself were the most popular amongst Liberal and NDP voters. And Pierre Poilievre sort of wore that as a badge of honor. And I found that confusing, because he should realize that if you want to win, you do need to win over some votes from the Liberals and the NDP. That's the only path to win in the next election. The same voting universe that we had in the last election fell short. So we do need to grow the reach of the party, and that's what my campaign is about.
All right, Patrick Brown, good to talk to you. Good to see you again. And as I have done with all the candidates, I wish you the best of luck, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Well, time now to check in with two members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Tonda MacCharles is a national political reporter for the Toronto Star, and Bob Fife is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Both of you, welcome. We have just heard from Patrick Brown speaking about the accusations which are continuing to fly in the federal Conservative leadership campaign. I want to ask you just briefly, both of you, what do you make of the race to date, and what are you watching for?
It's nasty, and it's going to get nastier, I'd say. Look, those kinds of accusations are meant to paint the other camp as untrustworthy and not fit for leadership. And so I think that's the kind of narrative you'll see all the camps try to build through the summer.
Okay, Bob, what do you make of it?
Well, I think Patrick Brown has a lot more trouble because of the City Council has just put out a statement this afternoon talking about the fact that he never shows up for meetings and that he's disclosed information on a radio program that could put the city of Brampton in financial difficulties. So he's got the Poilievre and everybody attacking him, but he's also got serious problems with his own city council. So this is going to get Tonda says, a lot nastier.
Okay, let's talk about the other big event this week, and that was the affordability speech by Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. It was touted as the big speech. This was going to make a difference. Politically, how's it all playing out? Tonda.
Look, I think there was a lot less there than met the eye, and I think that Freeland, the finance minister, is trying to basically build a better narrative on the budgets that they've already done. But even their governing partners in the supply agreement that gives stability to this parliament doesn't think that they're doing the right thing and that they are really tackling this issue. So I expect it to still be a huge political challenge for them in the months ahead. To the Liberals, I suppose, a great relief. Parliament will soon be rising, so it won't be a daily hammer. But even their NDP partners are saying, this is not enough. It's not enough at this time. Those measures were conceived and put forward a few months ago. The picture is rapidly changing.
Bob, what do you make of it? Obviously, her doing the speech and Liberals framing it before it was given as a major policy announcement on affordability, and yet it's not really received a success that was expected.
Look, the speech fell flat because they were trying to spin it as something significantly new, and it wasn't. all of the new money had already been in the previous budgets. More importantly, the business community, some of the things she's been talking about, that she talked about in her speech, the business community has been asking her to do for a number of years, which is to practice fiscal restraint and do something about our low productivity, which is absolutely essential. But in terms of helping people in their daily lives, there was nothing like you could have made perhaps a shortcut in the GST to help people through this inflationary times. Nothing like that to help people who are struggling for groceries and gasoline and all that sort of stuff. So, this was one of the things that the Liberals are pretty good at spinning. But in the end, I think it was not a very successful speech, and they're going to have a long, hard summer and fall ahead of them, because this inflation is not going to go down anytime soon.
That brings up the question then, and sort of getting back to the original point, but Tonda, do you think this was a miscalculation to spin this as a major policy announcement? They obviously thought that they had to try and get out ahead of it, because to date they've been saying we don't have to defend our record, we already have plenty on the plate. I mean, could this have actually backfired and created expectations and created frustrations?
I mean, possibly. The thing is, look, political critics and rivals always have, I guess, a motivation to attack something on those grounds. And maybe it is true that now that this money, I guess this $8.9 billion will start flowing, maybe some people will feel some relief. But I think that the government has to be careful when they talk a good game and don't walk the talk. In this case, to me, Chrystia Freeland came to the Toronto Star's Ed board today, and she defended the budget as both spending and on targeted measures and as a fiscally restrained budget, and kept sort of referring back to the various measures that show that the ratings agencies have a great deal of comfort with where Canada's at. Mm-hmm. But look, she herself is not ruling out additional measures. Okay. We still don't know what those will be. So I think they're very acutely aware this is going to be an ongoing challenge. Okay, well, that sets up the last question to Bob on just that. As Tonda mentioned, the finance minister did say we are in a difficult time, in an unpredictable time, almost leaving the door open for possible other measures. How vulnerable is the government on this? Tonda referred to it. I mean, the NDP is not very happy. They don't feel the government's doing enough immediately in concrete, immediate measures. How vulnerable is the government, and might we see new measures in a few months?
Well, it's very possible, given the volatility in the global economy, whether it's Ukraine and energy prices or these rapidly escalating inflation, that the government is going to have to come back in an economic statement with sort of a mini budget. I wouldn't rule that out. In terms of whether this government survives much longer, I think it's on two things. It's whether if Mr. Poilievre wins the Conservative leadership, and it's very possible Liberals could go a lot earlier than the 3-year period of time that they're talking about with the NDP. But I can't see the NDP pulling their support for the government at this particular point. They're in bed with these guys until at least 2 years.
Okay.
I think the NDP has a vested interest also in seeing some of the so-called, concessions they got from the Liberals actually being implemented. They want to see free dental care for low-income families. Yeah. They want other supports for housing. So I think Bob's right there. I don't think they're ready to pull the plug anytime soon. Okay, well, on that note, I want to thank both of you for sharing your thoughts. Obviously, always interesting as we approach the dying days of this spring sitting. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Martin. Have a good weekend, you guys.
And that's all for another edition of Primetime Politics on CPAC. I'm Martin Stringer. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.